Something else that you want to consider when you're actually setting up your wireless network is the possibility of network segmentation. Now, normally, particularly in a home environment, what you would be doing would be to connect your wireless access point directly to your local network, which makes sense because when you get on your wireless network, you really want to access everything that's on your local network. In a bigger environment, what you may want to do is have your wireless network be on a different network segment that may be connected to the rest of the networks via a firewall or some access lists or something that's going to do some sort of filtering or restriction from the wireless network. Now, when you're doing an enterprise level setup, what you may want to do is establish a guest network for people who actually don't authenticate to your network. So they've got some wireless connection, but they're not actually on your local network, meaning they can start to connect to your infrastructure or other desktop systems or whatever else may be on your network. So what you want to do is create a guest network. Now, again, I'm using DDWRT for my firmware on my access point here, but different firmware is going to have similar functionality probably, and yours may have something similar. In many cases, it may actually be called guest network. Right here, though, what I'm going to be doing is adding a virtual network. I can just say guest here, and I'm going to enable the access point, and I don't want to bridge this. The reason I don't want to bridge it is if I bridge it, they're basically directly connected to my network. So I don't want to bridge it. I actually want to give it a completely different address. Let's say 172.16.30.1, and then 255.255.255.0 is fine. I'm going to do NAT on this. I'm not going to do multicast forwarding, and I'm not actually going to turn on the AP isolation as well. What I want to do, though, is I'm going to allow the SSID to be broadcast because it's a guest network. And so I'm actually okay with people discovering this network. The important part here, though, is that I'm actually not bridging the two networks together. So I've disabled the bridging, and I'm using the unbridged mode here. And I'm creating a virtual interface. So this is really a sub-interface of my physical interface that is actually called WL0. And this is actually going to be a virtual interface or a sub-interface called WL0.1. It's going to have a completely different IP address than my primary network that's associated with this particular access point. So I've got a virtual interface that I have set up. I'm going to allow guest access on this. And then once people start connecting to this guest network, they're in a completely different IP network, which means that I can better track and allow access to and from based on the addresses that are on this particular network. So they can have some internet access potentially. They could maybe get access to a VPN device that I have allowed to bridge onto this network. So they can go connect to that, and they could use a virtual private network in order to access the corporate network if that's what they wanted to do. But I can do this guest access here using a virtual interface on my access point. And that type of network segmentation is really important when you're talking about wireless access, particularly if you're talking about using a bring your own device type of policy where the device is going to be connecting to your wireless network. And maybe you don't want those devices to have unrestricted access to the rest of your internal network. That's why network segmentation is really an important idea.